I thank the organisers for inviting me to attend the festival again. This afternoon I shall be doing my usual annual report on the world economy and my excuses for getting it wrong, but that is later. Today I think this morning we want to talk about a bigger development that is taking place in the world of money, and credit between the banks, central banks, and other financial institutions, and institutions which don't appear to be financial, who are turning themselves into such bodies. And this is going to be a new development over the next few decades. We have to see what direction it's going to take, whether it's going to be beneficial to the people of the world, or whether it is either turn out to be a damp squib, or even something in which provides a new method of exploitation of working people internationally. The title says Cryptocurrencies, and the future of money in the advertising. I'm now calling it the end of money. Maybe that's a little unfair, but what I want to show to you is that we should really start with what is money. Historically, what is the purpose of money? The purpose of money is to provide an easy means of exchange between commodities and things that people want to have, that doesn't require, it's a universally accepted means of exchange, where everybody accepts this object, this tangible commodity in the history of money, as money to be used universally, whether it's to purchase or sell different products or services. Primitive communities may have things, extra amounts of surplus, either it's wheat or cows or something, or women or slaves, that they want to exchange with other primitive communities. And they can do this by saying, well, I think one woman's worth 3 cows. Let's accept that as an exchange. Or increasingly, as exchange picks up, it will be easier to have something that you can either keep in your pocket, or it will not perish. There's a danger that cows die, there's a danger that wheat perishes, and that the danger that women run off. So you need something that you feel confident it will maintain its value and will be adequate for a means of exchange. And historically, what that became to be was usually precious metals, because they don't degrade into the earth. They remain solidly. There's very little even radioactive decline in gold or in silver. And so these products, which were difficult to mine, but nevertheless became something that you could sustain, increasingly became the method by which money came onto the world of exchange. Goldsmiths used to make gold things for lords and ladies and all the rest of it, but then goldsmiths were able to use extra gold to carry out transfers and enable credit to take place. So money became a tangible commodity as a universal means of exchange, and that was the crucial development as exchange built up. There is a theory at the moment called the modern monetary theory, and in that theory the argument is that it's not to do with exchange and the need for people to exchange products and services. It's to do with the state trying to get taxes out of you. They create money, they get debt, and then they tax you back. And so money was a product of the growth of the state. I don't think it's very convincing historically, although a number of left and Marxist economic historians are now writing huge books explaining how wrong it was, and how Marx and Engels are wrong in understanding it from the point of view of the development of exchange. But if we want to put it simply, money has 3 functions. It has to be a unit of account, so we must know $1 is $1. We have to measure whether it's in dollars or in gold or something. It must be a universal means of payment, as I just described, and a store of value that doesn't perish. Those are the key factors for something that is successful in terms of the process of money. And as I say, it's usually gold. But in modern capitalism and modern societies, there isn't enough gold and silver to match the dramatic expansion of production of things and services, particularly globally. So what governments did was that they introduced what are called fiat currencies. So they introduced paper dollars, still tangible, still perfectly okay. will be coin and notes, and people would use these, certainly up until the 18th and 19th century, as the primary means of money, the form that the money would take in order to make buy and sell products and so on. And the movement of gold bullion internationally was the way in which you settle things between countries, and the movement of coin, increasingly silver coin, then copper coin, as they tried to expand the supply of money in order to meet the growth of things and commodities. Of course, that meant that if the state is in control of this fiat money, then they can print, or they can make more money, or they can devalue the amount of silver in a coin or in a copper coin, and reduce the cost of it and still sell it at the previous value. So they can create inflation into the prices by producing more money than there is in terms of the value of production that it is. But so we have fiat currencies, and this is still the main form of money, and it's still, on the whole, until the last 100 years, it was physical. It was coins and notes. But now coins and notes have more or less become a much smaller part, not only of what banks hold, but also what everybody else holds in their wallets and so on. Coins. I just looked. I've got a fiver, and that's it. What have I got, though? I've got this, and I can go, buh. Now it's all digital, and we're operating off your bank account. So we're digitalizing money, and that's the new development that's been taking place in the last few decades. Here's the money supply, and this, I think this is in the case of the US maybe. From 1960 to more or less now, you can see that notes and coins, the red, in the central bank, I think, no, it's in commercial banks, is tiny. But banks don't hold notes and coins. You go there, you can ask them across the counter, and you get them. But that's not, most people, money, and the money supply held in the banks is now in bank deposits. It's held in your bank accounts. It's digitalized already at this point. And we're now increasingly finding that if I go to get my cup of tea before I come in here, as I say, I don't use a £5 note. I can just go goop with my credit card. And so the cash in payments is diminishing fast at various degrees and rates, Sweden being the fastest growth. Now, anybody in Sweden hardly knows what a note or a coin looks like anymore because they just have their card and or their mobile phone, which is the further development, in order to make payments. So cash is disappearing as we digitalize money. And also, automatic telemachines. Well, in my day, that was very revolutionary. To be able to go to a machine and stick a card in, and get out £50 in cash, and then go down the road and make a purchase at a shop. Obviously, old people like myself still do that. But in Sweden, they don't bother with that anymore. ATM transactions and ATM booths are beginning to disappear because everybody has the card or the mobile, and they are simply using those to make purchases. On the other side, the sellers are taking these purchases in the relation digitally, and everything's being cleared through the banking system of the bank accounts that everybody's got. Everything is still working through the banks. It's not, the banks are still in control of the clearing. They're still the intermediary between the buyer and the seller in this process, but it's becoming digital. These are the latest figures from the Bank of International Settlements, which is, if you like, is the head of the banking mafia in the world, the most destructive and horrible organisation, but it has all the data. And you can see mobile payments here. Big tech, the United States, it's still relatively small, but what we're seeing here is that the tech companies, Amazon, Google, Facebook, in other words, are taking payments now automatically digitalized. It's not a question of they're doing it; they can do it directly to some extent. And the yearly volume as a share of GDP is increasing across these countries. And we can see now the fractions of the population with bank accounts, mobile phones, and credit cards. Mobile phones, as you can see, is rising quite sharply. By the way, in China, everybody uses a mobile phone now to make payments. So they are technically well ahead in terms of digitalization of currency. and credit cards and mobile phones and bank accounts, all this digital form that's taking place. So the internet has generated the potential here now for a low-cost, anonymous, and rapidly verifiable transaction without going through bank accounts. And this is what we mean by a cryptocurrency. It's a currency that does not go through bank accounts. How's that possible? So if I make a purchase in Bitcoin, or I have Bitcoin, and I make a purchase with something, it's not going through my bank account. That purchase is being verified by whom? Is it being verified by the banks? No. It's being verified by everybody else who's participating in the Bitcoin process. And how is that possible? Well, here's the sign for Bitcoin. Back just about a decade ago, somebody called Satoshi Nakamoto came up with an algorithm, a method by which you could make settlements between purchases and sales without using banks and just by using everybody participating on computer programs. By the way, Satoshi Nakamoto has never been found. He's a very mysterious figure, and we're not even sure that he exists. He may be a combination of a bunch of Japanese internet and algorithm experts. But anyway, that's how it developed. And the idea is that they use what they call a blockchain, so it doesn't require a banking or central authority to validate transactions. Every time you make a transaction using the Bitcoin in this case, but there are other cryptocurrencies, then a computer code, an algorithm is presented, and people will, if they can decode that and make the transaction, it's recorded indefinitely in a huge decentralized digital ledger book forever into the system, and so that transaction by all those participating is accepted and verified. Do you understand that? Because I don't. But that is what the argument is, that we now no longer need a bank to verify whether credit or debit's taken place. Everybody, all you lot, can be on the computer. You can all have your Bitcoins, digital Bitcoins. You won't be able to pick them up. They're just in a digital wallet on your mobile or in your computer. And then when you want to make a transaction with Amazon or with James over in Australia, who also has a digital wallet, you make that transaction and it's direct. And because you're using an algorithm from Sakamoto, whatever his name was, Nakamoto, then this blockchain will allow everybody to accept that transaction as having taken place forever. It's completely validated by the computer program. But people have to decode that program to validate that. And so there's no banks. Now I'm going to read this out, so this will make it absolutely clear. The main technological innovation behind cryptocurrencies has been blockchain, a ledger containing all transactions for every single unit of currency. It differs from existing physical or digital ledgers, and it is decentralized. There is no central authority verifying the transactions. Instead, it employs verification based on cryptographic proof, where various members of the network verify blocks of the transactions approximately every 10 minutes. So all the transactions in the world are verified by these people who are mining to do this, and I'll explain why in a minute. And the incentive for these people to verify these transactions is in the form that if they verify them decoding the algorithms, then they get some Bitcoins. They mine them, there's the phrase. And we're not going down a hole and digging out gold anymore. They're computer mining them, and they're able to obtain Bitcoins as a result. And if the Bitcoin universe and transactions increases, then they'll get more and more Bitcoins. And there's a limit on the number of Bitcoins. There's no government just printing money as it feels. There's an absolute limit in the algorithm about how many Bitcoins forever can be produced. So therefore, as we progressively use this Bitcoin transaction universally and it replaces all other currencies and all transactions go through the Bitcoin system, then people will be mining more Bitcoins, and eventually it will also begin to drive up the value of Bitcoins in relation to all other goods and so on. So everything is minted or mined. So now, does this mean, having got rid of the banks, the central banks, the government squeezing, printing money and inflating everything, we finally have a people's currency controlled by all of you with all your computers and your wallets? united in the great socialist universe to produce bitcoins in order to make our transactions, because we all trust each other, and we'll be able to verify decentralized basis every transaction we make on a fair basis. Is it a people's currency? Does it meet the criteria of money which we talked about before? Will it become a universal means of exchange? Well, not yet, that's clear, because at the moment, I still think the dollar, the pound, the euro, the yen, and all the other currencies dominate most transactions. The government national fiat currencies dominate. The Bitcoin, I don't think in this room anybody is got a computer with a bit wallet where they're making transactions using Bitcoin and the blockchain system. Any hands up? One. There you go. Had to be him, didn't it?
I used to.
Used to, yeah. So, but we're still down at 1 out of what, 108, much less than that actually on the total figures. And is this Bitcoin? Bitcoin, by the way, is not the only digital currencies. There's about 20, 30 of them there, because each bunch of miners want to create a different algorithm that uses a different currency because they want to get the people. They're the people's currency. No, Bitcoin, no, we're much better. We've got a better system, and so on. So there's competition between different people to try and get this universal currency. Is it universally accepted for transactions? Well, it clearly isn't. We've got 2 people who use it. We haven't asked them what they use it for yet, because I don't think most Bitcoin activity is not about transacting or buying things. It's about speculating on whether the price of Bitcoin is going up or whether it's going down. So it's nothing to do much with transactions. Is it a safe and trusted store of value? Bitcoin starts off only a few years ago at a few dollars, if you want to measure it in terms of dollars, because surprisingly, people, when they get a Bitcoin, are still hankering that maybe they could transfer that into dollars if they can find a market, or transfer it into pounds to get something that they actually think would actually buy something. So Bitcoin becomes a sort of speculative currency, like gold is also now, against the fiat currencies. And people still want to make transactions. They still have to pay their taxes in fiat currencies, so they may want to transfer their digital universal Bitcoin currency into a national fiat currency to make payments and other transactions. That's still the process, because Bitcoin hasn't taken over. So, but is it safe and trusted? Well, the Bitcoin started off at, say, $6 a Bitcoin. Then it went to $20,000 the Bitcoin. Then it went down to $6,000 a Bitcoin. Then it went back to $10,000 a Bitcoin. And the next day it went down to $8,000 a Bitcoin. So you can see it's not exactly stable, which means that every day you want to make a transaction in Bitcoin and you want to convert it into a fiat currency because you want to make a payment in that area, you're taking a big risk. One day it's $20,000. Wow, thank you very much, I'm a millionaire. The next day it's $5,000 and you paid $10,000 for it. You've lost all your money when you have to make a transfer. So it is very volatile and speculative at the moment. And there are other issues. Bitcoin has limited people with internet connections. Now, I know that most of us, probably in this room, if not all of us, have got an internet connection. Maybe not all the time. I was struggling to get on a little bit earlier, and if my Bitcoin price had moved and I wanted to get out, I might have lost quite a bit of money. So I need to be on Bitcoin and I need to be on internet connection. And there's still hundreds of millions, if not more, of people who don't have a regular internet connection, which will be necessary to make daily transactions or hourly transactions if we're using this currency. At least if I've got my credit card or my coins, I can hold that and instantly make a transaction, even if I'm not on the internet. So that's one issue. And so far, it's almost impossible to buy anything with Bitcoin directly. Yes, there are companies, and I think it's Estonia, has a Bitcoin ATM. So you can use Bitcoins and you can then make purchases. Some companies are taking Bitcoins. Usually it's other Bitcoin people or other cryptocurrency people who are swapping these things. But in terms of going down the Mile End Road and going into a supermarket with your digital wallet and saying, I want to pay in Bitcoins, I'm afraid that doesn't really happen at the moment. Particularly as Bitcoin is a very large Bitcoin is, say, $10,000. It's not easy to break it up. You've really got to digitalize it right down to make it useful. And it's slow. Actually, transactions of Bitcoins, if you make a transaction in Bitcoin, it's about 3 per second. Your credit card does 9,000 per second. It's much quicker to validate that transaction using existing digital methods like a Visa credit card or a wallet which contains your banking deposits. So setting up a wallet to conduct transactions on the Bitcoin is still quite a difficult procedure. Who are you setting up this wallet with? Who is holding your Bitcoin wallet? Who are they? What are they doing with your money? Well, would you believe they're scamming it like hell? They're frauding it like hell. They are collapsing, in many cases, Bitcoin exchanges and people who are presumably holding your wallets. In a number of cases where people are speculating in Bitcoins, taken, I don't know, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, $1 million worth of Bitcoin in their wallet, and the next day they find out when they press the button to get their Bitcoin back, it's not there anymore. Somebody scammed it off because there is no regulation of this, because it's free, it's away from you, horrible central banks and governments. It's all you out there, you nice people, validating all this. So how could there possibly be any scamming? Because every one of you in this room is pure and honest and fair and wouldn't dream of stealing $1 million from somebody else's Bitcoin wallet, would you? So this remains a big issue in terms of how it proceeds. And there, as I said earlier, that's what the movement of the price of Bitcoin price in US dollars. It's absolutely nowhere. Only a few years ago, rockets up, rockets down, rockets up, rockets down. It's not a very stable currency from which we can work. That's just Bitcoin. Other versions, Ethereum, I won't go through them, they've all got weird and wonderful names, have similar volatilities. And then there is this issue, the energy deficit. Bitcoin mining, in order to create these blockchain transactions and get the Bitcoins, the miners have to use a huge amount of computer power. Can you imagine? All you out there think I've got my PC, you know. That's nothing. They've got great big centers in the middle of the United States and China and elsewhere, coming right across, sucking up the electricity of the world in massive amounts in order to carry out all these transactions. I think it was estimated that the current computer miner centers are using up as much electricity as the whole of Ireland every day. That's the indication of the ecological impact and the heat on this, which maybe we could use. We could take the heat off solar-wise and do something else with that heat. But nevertheless, at the moment, it's using up a lot of energy. And is it a free currency and controlled by capital? Are you freely participating equally in running this currency for the benefit of the people? No, because the miners, in fact, there's just 4 big mining centers controlling virtually all the transaction verification and therefore much of the mining of the currency. Large companies are increasingly control of these capitalist entities. At the moment, there's quite a lot of scam companies, but increasingly it will be large companies monopolizing the control of the Bitcoin market. So if it ever became viable tender for paying tax and so on, it would require some form of price relationship with the existing governments and the existing current national currencies. So big governments and big business, in my view, would still be there with cryptocurrencies. Now, this is strongly disagreed with by our internet universal people's currency idea, that the internet is freeing us all from capitalism. In my view, that's not the case. Capitalism always brings its control over any new technology if it can, and Bitcoin and others are no exception. Now, I've only got 10 minutes, so I need to move on beyond crypto to digital, because if we're talking about digital currencies, crypto is a special thing, a universal thing, but we can also talk about the development of digital currencies. Crypto, in my view, if it ever becomes, if Bitcoin stays, it's a bit like Esperanto. Do you remember Esperanto? It's an international language for all people. We do away with English, we do away with French, we do a German. Everybody speaks, talks and writes in Esperanto, a people's language. It's a great idea. What has happened under capitalism imperialism? Anglo-American imperialism language, which I am now speaking in a certain form, is dominant, and Esperanto is nowhere. That is most likely what would happen with these general currencies. But we do have, I'm just going to skip a few of these, because I want to get to this baby. Here he is, Mark, the Roman emperor, who has noticed that Facebook, although there are 4 billion users of Facebook around the world, is not growing any more as he would like, and advertising is on Facebook is revenues are not exponentially expanding quite as he would like. I noticed in the Hong Kong demonstrations, it was pointed out that what was half the problem with the Chinese authorities checking on what people were doing was they were looking on Facebook social media, and all these young Hong Kong people were on Snapchat or some, so they missed it all. Because apparently on Snapchat you just so demo Parliament smash. While on Facebook you go, I think we might be going along slow, but like me, when I write on Facebook it goes on forever. While apparently young people don't bother with too many words, they just put the picture up. So Zuckerberg has realised that he needs to do something else to expand his business, and he's got 4 billion users, and he thought, why don't I offer them all a currency so they can buy everything I advertise on through my own currency? They don't have to use dollars, pounds, they can use Libra. And when they get Libra in a wallet with Facebook, and we're honest, upright organisation, not like these Bitcoin people, you'll be able to have a Libra wallet and be sure that it's safe and sound, and you'll be able to use those Libra to buy everything we advertise on Facebook. And you won't have to go anywhere else then. You go, unfortunately, Amazon and Google aren't too happy with that and haven't been prepared to join this Libra plan. But a lot of big companies are, so I don't know what they are, but maybe you can buy a missile with Libra in the future through Facebook. But most importantly, perhaps for the individual person, you'll be able to send money to Sam in Australia instantly without going through the banking system, without paying banking fees. Transaction costs will be just a minimal amount. So you'll be able to use these wallets to transfer in Libra. So it's a bit like going to the theatre. I know you don't go, but or the cinema, and so I've got a big bag, so you hand it in for a token. They give you a token. When you come back out again, you hand the token over and you get your bag back. So it's a token system. But the token system works, and with 4 billion people, that's a lot of token movement. So you don't need to do anything else if you're making those transfers. Maybe that solves the problem. But what if you want to buy something that's beyond the tokens that Facebook doesn't provide? Facebook is aiming, Mr. Zuckerberg, is aiming to provide everything you'll ever need using Libra. You won't need to use anything else, just Libra. And I shall be up here helping you out. Behind him lies 20 big investors who have put their money to back the Facebook Libra system. And Libra will be valued against a basket of currencies. So it won't just be like Bitcoin is $6,000 per Bitcoin. It will be per a ratio of the US dollar, the euro, Japanese yen, British pound, Swiss franc, and there'll be a basket. So it's pretty stable. So unless those 3 big currencies in the world go all over the shop, Libra will be fixed against them. So it will be a reasonably stable currency. So if the pound goes shooting down, how could that possibly happen in the next year? Then it will be compensated by the other 4 currencies, which may move up. So Libra will remain reasonably stable. So there's stability. We've got all these big people behind us, and it will give you a global currency and a financial infrastructure that empowers billions of people. What could be better? But it's really, in effect, privatising the digital currency system. It's taking digital currency out of the hands of governments, out of the hands of central banks and the commercial banks, because it's decentralised using the blockchain technology. And so instead of the central bank, the Bank of England, or the government, or the United States Fed, really controlling the money supply and trying to keep interest rates under control, it'll be Mark Zuckerberg who will be controlling the money supply and the transactions around the world. Now, when you put some money in the bank, even if you put it in for just a short time on an instant account, you sometimes get a bit of interest back on it, because the bank will pay you interest because you've given them the money. If you've got a Libra wallet, and say you've got 1,000 Libras in your Facebook wallet, digital wallet, it doesn't exist, it's just on the computer, and they've now, and you don't spend it straight away, it sits there for a day, a week, a month, a year before you get round to spending it or transferring it to Sam in Australia. What happens to the 1,000 Libra? Well, would you believe it? The investors in Libra, controlling the board, takes all your Libra and goes and buys dollar instruments or pound instruments, certificates of deposit, and gets interest on them while they're waiting for you to use it. And will that interest be passed to you? Oh, no, it won't. Facebook will keep all the interest of your Libra wallets. Why? Well, because there's a lot of transaction costs and setting up costs, and you have to cover that. You've heard that before. The fees, the admin fees, all those phrases you get when you set up accounts. So the investors will keep all the interest that will exist in the system floating about. Now, in my view, finishing now, Chair, that in my view, the Libra system is a privatised digital currency. It's trying to replace the existing organisations of government and the regulations of it. At the moment, it will be completely unregulated, although Facebook is discussing with the authorities about how to regulate the fact that you might put all your loose Libra into, I don't know, US property in Western Australia or something like that, and it all goes down, and the Facebook's Libra goes bust, and you lose all your money in your wallet. They want regulation over what would happen. Facebook said there's no possibility that was too big, we're too marvellous. But nevertheless, there's no regulation at the moment, so we discussed. But out of this, finish on this point, comrades, that what we're talking about, digital currency, does open the technical possibilities for everybody to have a currency which is universally accepted and instantly transferable and as a unit of account and as a store of value built into your computers. It's a great new technical innovation. But it's not going to happen in that form unless we have a public control of the whole digital system. It means public ownership of a digital currency, an international digital currency. So even before we had digitalization, what we want is a global world currency, don't we? But that means a global world economy and a global world government, global world control with people's democratic control of that, not a Libra controlled by one billionaire's social media network controlling the whole system. So we're posed now exactly as you would expect under capitalism. A new technical innovation, digitalized currency, is going to be molded into a capitalist privatized currency or into a wild speculative lunacy currency like Bitcoin. The idea of a people's currency, which this technology could provide, is not going to be delivered under this system.
And we'll take contributions of 3 minutes per person, please. So I saw this hand first, and I saw you next. Yeah.
I became an expert on Bitcoin accidentally when somebody asked me should they put Bitcoin in mining software on their left-wing website. And I just said no, and they decided that we needed to write an article. So I wrote an article for a Turkish news site titled "From a Reactionary Ideology to a Useless Technology." If you read Satoshi Nakamoto's paper, it's not liberating, it's what's the thing they have? Libertarian. It's right-wing libertarian. The idea is that somehow the state is the enemy, and the whole point of Bitcoin is not based on trust, and the blockchain is not based on, it's based on distrust. That's why it takes so much energy, because it's people in the market distrusting one another and forcing one another to do these extremely long calculations that are using all this electricity and destroying the info. So that's what's wrong with it. I then got invited to go and talk to all kinds of people about this, and all they wanted to know was how to make money out of it. And I got invited even to a commercial day school, which people were being charged hundreds of dollars to attend, to explain. And I explained Bitcoin technology, the blockchain technology, and then said, "Rubbish, shit." And they didn't hear that. I said it. Then in the afternoon they had seminars for the people. People were there from big companies, banks, Ford, and so on in Turkey. And they had workshops about how they would use blockchain. And they couldn't find a single possible use for it. It's such an inefficient and useless technology. But we have another technology in Turkey, an unofficial currency, a non-state currency. Half of Turkey's GDP is in the form of post-dated checks. Right? Post-dated checks, that's how the whole economy runs. 6 months later, a year later, and essentially what's happening is businesses are creating money. which is an extraordinary thing. How does that work? What do you need if you have an unofficial money? You need an enforcer. You need the state. What's the enforcer in Turkey? It's called the Czech Senet Mafia. There's a branch of the mafia whose role is to enforce post-dated checks. You know, by going around with physical force. If you go, that's why when you have a currency, you need an enforcer, and you're absolutely right. You know, the digital thing is great, but you need an enforcer, and you need a democratic enforcer. You look at what happened. Ethereum, one of these, another Bitcoin currency, there was a bit. $500 million was stolen. What did they actually do? How did they get that money back? They actually, the main people on Ethereum all got together, phoned one another up in a traditional way, and agreed actually to wind back the transactions, which you can do. It's not true that the transactions are under risk, and they agreed to do it. And so, in some sense, this was it. So the answer is really the ideology. Read Satoshi Nakamoto's paper. It's only 9 pages long. It's reactionary politics, libertarian. You know, this gun nut libertarian politics is behind it, and that's why it's rubbish.
Morning, comrades. Gary from South Wales. Thank you for the talk, Robert. Absolutely, Michael. Absolutely fascinating. I think yours are your talks. My understanding of the creation of Bitcoin was primarily a geopolitical one. I sometimes watch RT, and Max Kaiser is on there. He's a big cheese. I know he's all over the shop, and he has no answers at all. But it seems to me what he was talking about is that he was talking about the challenge in the central banks and the power thereof, not just of the financial crash of 2008, but breaking up the Bretton Woods system post 1945, which replaced the pound and introduced the dollar, you know, as the major fiat currency. So if you're a major company, conducting any sort of business today, you have to go through the dollar system, and that dollar system, it leaves a digital trace. So I know that the dollar's floating now since 1971. It's supposed to go off the gold standard. That linked to the dollar. So my understanding is a geopolitical one, and they're particularly worried, the central banks, because it's of this creation. Hence why, you know, we've got other companies, banks, looking at digital cryptocurrencies too, because you know it's with the blockchain technology, you know, it's sort of relatively secure. And understand the point about there could be scams, and also take the point about the energy issue is an absolutely vital one. But it poses up another question: if we are going to go down this route, and I think we will do, because this is only accrue a bit more. Well, how do governments tax the blockchain, if you like, you know, for services and things? That poses another question. So I just want to really throw that into the mix. But thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask?
I think if you look at Libra, what's the real prize for Libra? Libra may become the world leader in remittances, money transfers abroad, and things like that. This is already a big industry. People need to move money across borders. That's the big prize for them, and that's the thing that they could actually achieve if they overcome the considerable political and technological problems. What I don't believe, and I agree completely with Michael Roberts here, is that at the moment it is credible to talk about either Libra or cryptocurrencies as a replacement for the monetary system. But to explain that, we have to go beyond the technological limitations. We have to talk about the basic political economy here. And we have to go back to what Marx's understanding of money was in a capitalist economy. Because the dominant form of money throughout the existence of the capitalist system has not been banknotes and coins. The dominant form of money has been credit money created by the banking system. And the central pivot of the banking system in any capitalist economy is a central bank. It's that which binds the banking system to the state. And it's that underpins the credit money created by bank, with the confidence for it to act as a compulsory means of circulation, and for it to act as a reliable store of value. And this becomes particularly crucial as you move away from pure forms of commodity money like gold towards pure fiat money. How confident are you that the central bank, linked to the sovereign state, can defend your currency's value as crisis evolves, and so on and so forth? This becomes a central question. And therefore, what happens when you start to move away from that? And by the way, when we talk about the central bank, we shouldn't pretend the central bank is neutral. The central bank is an enforcer of capitalist interests. The point, though, is it doesn't reflect the particular interests of one particular capitalist. Yeah? It can arbitrate and mediate between different capitalist interests across a national economy. It's not neutral, but it arbitrates between them. Now, the problems with cryptocurrencies and with Libra and so on are manifold. First of all, as Michael Roberts says, they are not reliable sources of means of circulation or means of payment or stores of value because their value fluctuates wildly. This is why Libra is a stable currency. It's stabilised against a basket of real currencies, if you like, underpinned by sovereign states. And that's a route that they've had to go down because of that. Secondly, if you're going to create a stable coin like Libra, who pays for this massive infrastructure? Do we trust Facebook to arbitrate between different capitalist forces? No, because Facebook have an independent capitalist interest and have proved time and time again they cannot be trusted with our data and with this information. They will use it for commercial gain. So who's going to trust them to arbitrate between these different capitalist forces? Thirdly, can it play the role of world money, replacing the US dollar? Well, I think the US government will have something to say about that. The whole point about world money is that world money, as Marx described it, the role is taken by different national currencies that seek to project themselves on a global scale. The dollar, increasingly the euro and renminbi are trying to challenge its role, not very effectively at the moment. But there's a jostling between different sovereign states for who's going to control world money. And the sovereign states are not going to be neutral on this question. And just a final point, the central banks increasingly use their control over the monetary system to try to firefight the problems of crisis. Look at the response to 2008, 2009. Look at what Erdogan is doing at the moment in Turkey. Today he dismissed the head of the central bank because he wasn't doing what he wanted him to do to control the monetary policy of Turkey. Sovereign states are not going to sit back and surrender that right to Mark Zuckerberg or anyone else. So I think that the prospects of these forms of money replacing the dollar and the other dominant forms of money is extraordinarily limited.
Work in Tanzania, and for subsistence farmers there who are using things like M-Pesa that have very, very high transaction costs. This is a question. Could something like Libra actually be very beneficial for people like that?
Thank you. What's next?
Thanks. I always feel like with economics I've got a very, very slippery, fragile grasp on what's going on. I'm one of those people who gets to chapter 3 of Capital every time and then goes to what. So my question might not make as much sense. I think
Chapter 3 is a difficult one.
I think that's what everyone says. At least I feel like I'm not alone in that. But my question is does the blockchain reflect the libertarian ideology that Conrad talks about? Meaning that because they only see currency basically as a means of exchange, that they don't see it as a holder of value, and therefore the blockchain they think will allow it to work as a currency because it allows it to basically you say, well, previously in exchange for this amount of money, amount of goods, so now we'll exchange for the same amount. But therefore, because they don't understand that the value of a currency will fluctuate depending on the means of production and the rate of exploitation, the currency could never really adapt to any changes like that, which a central bank can, because they can raise and lower the supply of money quite readily. So that's my question.
Yeah, most of the key, Ian from Hackney, most of the key points have been made, I think, by Joseph, Chris about the libertarian ideology behind it, and by Michael in his assessment of Facebook and Libra. But I just wanted to add a couple of things. I work as a journalist covering the travel industry, and digital payments are a huge feature of lots of businesses now, and I encounter a huge number of evangelists for crypto
payments and so on. And because this technology appears to offer means of bypassing intermediaries, all businesses love that. Either because they want to cut their costs of distribution or whatever it is, or because they want to replace the intermediaries by being the intermediary themselves. So there is colossal business interest in the technology. The second thing to say is I think it's useful to differentiate between public and private blockchains. Bitcoin and the other 20 or so cryptocurrencies are public blockchains, as Michael described, where technically anybody can go in. They're hugely draining on power as a consequence. Something I read suggested that Bitcoin alone, if all the bitcoins are produced that could be produced, would make dealing with global warming impossible. And that's just the one current cryptocurrency, never mind business piling in. So that's vitally important. Private blockchains are essentially distributed ledger technology, and that's not new. That's been around for some time. Businesses are very interested in distributed ledger technology because they think they can use it to bypass intermediaries. But those are closed systems, and that's what Facebook is proposing, a closed system, so that there wouldn't be public any kind of public access. The prospects of that replacing fiat currency in central banks, I think, is unthinkable at the current time. But that doesn't mean Mark Zuckerberg won't want to do it. But there's just one final point I want to make. The way that these huge platform businesses, like monopolies like Facebook, work is they have an idea, they develop it enough to launch it, and then they develop it further while after it's launched. It's called beta testing, and they will not be able to do that with a currency. The Bank of International Settlements, which is like the central bank, has already said this is a very bad idea. We're not in favour of this at all. The Financial Services Authority in Britain this week told Facebook, you won't be beta testing this. You'll get this right first time, or you won't do it, and we will decide whether you've got it right first time.
This thing about Bitcoin coming from a sort of reactionary ideology is absolutely 100% true. It's sort of one-sided utopianism, and it is essentially a new version of sort of gold bug kind of mentality. The comrade mentioned about the Brexit was after that this sort of idea developed amongst certain groups of people, a lot of conspiracy theory-minded people, that this change from gold-backed currency to fiat currency, was this massive shift because of these kind of things. They sort of focused on circulation and focused on this kind of thing. If you look at conspiracy theorists like Alex Jones or whatever, he's always been like trying to sell gold to people on this basis. This is a more stable thing that the government can't intervene in. These kind of things. In a sense, it's sort of a different one-sided utopianism to modern monetary theory, which is just in the other direction. Whereas this is making a fetish out of gold and that kind of stable, independent commodity currency, whereas MMT is making a fetish out of the sort of fiat currency of the government can just print as much as they want. So it's an interesting opposition there between them, I think. But with all that said, and the fact it is reactionary and it's right-wing libertarian, and it isn't that idea isn't something we should support, but it is a utopian fantasy, one-sided reactionary way of looking at a genuine, real problem. Which the way that the banks control the finance system is genuinely a threat to us. If you look at what happened to WikiLeaks when it first came out, revealing the war crimes in the United States, they were immediately deplatformed by things like Visa and all these sort of banking things, and nearly drove them under, and actually was Bitcoin that allowed them to stay afloat during that period. So, not to say that this kind of thing, this kind of decentralised currency that the blockchain requires is a way forwards. The ecological cost alone sort of absolutely rules that out. But I think we also do have to recognise that although the fundamental thing is class struggle and sort of, if we smash the system and take over it, then we'll take over the central banks, it won't be a problem anymore, will it? And we'll use our control of the circulation to deny the reactionaries, all that kind of shit, right? I mean, that's the sort of, the ideal. But anyway, that is a real problem, and circulation is an important site of power sort of by the capitalist class. Thanks.
Yeah, the balance of payments between states is done in currency. And the reason for that is because of the monopoly of force that these currencies have got. The dollar, there's no the fact that the dollar is world currency. The reason it's world currency because America's got the biggest force. You know, just like Britain, what validates the pound here is the monopoly of force through the state. Like Joseph said, you know, you've got the Bank of England, who's the arbitrary between commodities, between banks. Now, this is not a new thing. Early capitalism, you know, at factories up north or in mining villages, they had their own currencies. You know, and they interacted, and you could only buy what was in the shop supplied by the place you worked. You know, it's not a new thing. No currency can come onto the market because, you know, there's no such thing as exchange without force in this society. So you have to have force behind it. You know, the pound has force, the dollar has force, the euro has force. The monopoly of force is the state, and the state's arbitrary to that is the Bank of England. No bank in this society can work without the authority of the Bank of England.
Yeah, I first became aware, the first time I heard of Bitcoin was during Occupy, and I happened to be at the time, for my sins, a treasurer of Occupy London Stock Exchange. So I was getting all these people saying, you mustn't put our money in the bank, we must go into Bitcoin. And I didn't even know what they were talking about at the time in 2011. I just had no concept of the idea. Which is a bit sad because one of my jobs now is I'm called a payment solutions architect, and one of the is how to automate a payment system. So I'm doing lots of projects with very, very large banks, and as you mentioned quite rightly, there are very many different forms of virtual currencies. I mean, dozens of different ways of implementing a virtual currency system. You can have very trustless systems, ones which are more closed, and all the points that you made are valid. But I want to say also, with the trend towards demonetization is having serious political consequences. In India, do you remember Narendra Modi says, I'm going to phase out all the big notes. This is a power grab by the state. We must understand that. One of my jobs, because I am doing payment solutions architects, is I look at the systems that the government's put in place in banks to control who has access to money. So there's this thing called embargo filtering, which the company I work for supplies, and basically what that says is the government or the central bank publishes an embargo list of individuals that can no longer use the system. And so what happens is, when you do a transaction, it checks your name. Is your name on the list? And you immediately get stopped. So the trend towards the demonetization is quite dangerous, and it's giving the power, enormous power to the state to actually freeze your bank account whenever it wants to. And this is something, that's why they're so keen on demonetization. And so my advice to you is to keep a shoebox and to keep a nice stash of money in there, because I can tell you what they're doing is quite sinister, the whole idea of embargo filtering. And the power it gives the state, just like that, to freeze your account. And that's a huge power.
I entirely agree with what Joseph was saying about the barriers to particularly, well, for Bitcoin, but particularly for things like Libra, ultimately to become a dominant, a new world currency. That's absolutely correct. But of course, the fundamental instabilities within the system are not in and of themselves monetary phenomena. They're created by the creation of value in the real world, by the real production of commodities. Money is vital, of course, in a capitalist economy, as Bob's pointed out, as the unit of account, the means of payment, and the store of value. And you can't have a capitalist system without having confidence in money as a universal equivalent, or as universal as you can get it within particular states. I just wanted to raise the question that if they were to go down this road, and Libra were to develop, and they seem quite keen to do it because there's a huge profit potentially, huge power potentially in all of it. Wouldn't it be another source of instability? At the moment you have, as Joseph has pointed out, the far-fighting of central banks, because they have a certain authority over their money and there's confidence in them, to quantitative ease. It doesn't solve the problems, but it can far-fight. But if you have a confidence in a currency in which there is no central bank interested in the far-fighting, sure, and people have got confidence in that, then the problems will multiply, it seems to me, for future instability.
Yes, I have a question about the fundamental problem of fiat currency is the inflation. Is cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin, not solving that problem? And is it maybe therefore the future solution for store of value? That's my question, because of there's a limit, there's 21 million max on Bitcoin. After that there will be no more Bitcoins made or printed out. So it's deflationary and it's solving a fundamental problem of fiat currency. Is that not a possible future? That's my question.
It was basically about the question Comrade has just said, really. If Bitcoin's a currency, then can you borrow Bitcoin? Because obviously a massive part of currency is debt instruments. There's enormous amounts of debt. So where does a cryptocurrency fit in with that part of the monetary system?
Okay, thanks very much for everyone's brilliant contributions. I'm going to bring Michael back in now to sum up.
Well, comrades, of course, it's not possible to answer all the questions, so I'm going to choose the ones I know about. Let me first say that, yes, it's really interesting to note that the ideology behind the blockchain technology and therefore onto the cryptocurrencies is a libertarian one that supposedly, once they're all free individuals competing against each other rather than combining, we'll have a better world rather than allowing the big government to control our social services and provide benefits to people who can't compete. The libertarian ideology is always one that seems to work well, based on the philosophy of an American libertarian called Ayn Rand, who said the most important thing was that there's a small group of people who really are much cleverer and smarter than the rest of you, and the rest of you should just work for us to make sure the system works in the most efficient way, and if you don't like it, we'll kill you. It's an exciting novel, you should read it. That sort of ideology apparently is behind Mr. Sakimoto's idea that we can free ourselves from government and from the rule of the big institutions. But as we've seen, I think that actually the process of this cryptocurrency is eventually going to lead to the big institutions controlling these digital currencies and cryptocurrencies. It won't transform it because it's not changing the social structure of the economy and the class relations between the owners of capital and those of us who just own our own labour power. This fundamental contradiction, and a contradiction under capitalism where the drive is for profit, as Mr. Zuckerberg is making clear, and not for the interests of the needs of a better way of transforming and transacting the things that we want to do between us, each other, whether it's across the world or in the northern city in a small shop. Which brings me to the point of Tanzania. I think the one area perhaps where Libra, as Joseph has said, is going to have some success if it gets off the ground, is it's going to provide a much faster and decentralized and efficient way of transacting international transactions. So if you're in Tanzania and you have to go down to the Western Union, which is one of the biggest ways in which you make a transfer, you have to go in and sign the thing up. You pay a huge fee to Western Union out of that. Occasionally, I get royalties from this book, which is published by Haymarket in Chicago. Not very much, and not very often. But when I get it, I get a check in dollars. And I have to go to the bank, and I have to change it. And then, lo and behold, HSB say, well, we've put your check in, and we've deducted huge fee comes off of that just for putting it through the system, through the intermediaries of the bank. And that can be changed by this removing the intermediary and allowing immediate transactions. Western Union are very worried about this development, of course, because this threatens the nature of their businesses. But that's just about the only other area that you could think. The rest of it is either going to be sucking up the interest on your Libra wallets for their benefit, speculating with your Libra into fiat currency credit, and turning what is a currency into a credit instrument process, just like the shadow banking that we've seen around the world over the past period, posing a danger of an extra layer of financial instability on the already existing levels of financial instability. So those are the two sides of the coin in this issue. Sorry about that one. And in the question of money supply, yes, this development of extra credit money, which could come out of these and other developments in the digital currency area not under the control of regulation, is in the case of Bitcoin, it also has the other thing. Because it's a limit, because it's a bit like gold, there's a limit of how much there is. There's only 21 million Bitcoins that can be produced. In a set, at least in principle, it's deflationary because you can't expand the amount of Bitcoin. But I can assure you there'll be a hell of a sight more problems before we get to the position of deciding whether it's inflationary or deflationary in the world economy in terms of destroying the position of... because if something is limited and yet you're still expanding, what you're doing is you're creating a real problem in actually meeting people's needs. You're going to be driving up the cost of having that money and deflating the cost of the commodities. So it's not in line, because you want a system where if you're going to have money, which of course under socialism you wouldn't need because you'd be distributing things according to need. This is because we still have exchange and we still have individual producers exchanging and for a profit, and on markets that we have the issue of trying to find a universal means of exchange. So on the one hand, Libra could be expanding credit and causing an inflationary situation, and on the other hand, Bitcoin, if it ever became dominant, could actually be a deflationary situation. But these are entirely hypothetical situations which are not really going to apply in the real world over the next period. Yes, I think it's an interesting point made about embargoes, that there's a list that the central banks have of people who can't make any transfers. They've been embargoed. It's a wonderful thing that we shall have as a socialist government, because once we have control of the central bank, Mr. Zuckerberg is not going to be allowed to distribute his money across the board. And if Lord Sugar wants to leave the country with his money, we might well block his account. This is a powerful weapon for a socialist government and a workers' control of the banking system to stop big capital taking their money out of the country when there's a prospect of a socialist government that threatens their interests. At the moment, of course, it's working in the interests of capital to exclude, I don't know, Iranian oil exports or whatever. But it's a weapon of control which would exist in the period of the struggle that a workers' government has. So we can't rule that out as something we might well keep in the interests of the workers' government as we go forward. I think the question of demonetisation has been raised because, as we saw, the cash is disappearing. But for a sizable section of the world's population, cash is still necessary. It's still the cheapest way of making transactions and doing deals. If banks completely control everything to digitalised currency, that you either have to have a deposit in the bank or you have to have digital currency controlled by Libra or by the central bank, then you are imposing a new form of control over a whole layer of people in society who are not in a position to operate in any other way as many of the people in Tanzania are concerned. And yes, when Modi demonetised the higher currencies notes in India, he said that was to stop corruption and people taking big money notes in and out of the country and hiding them and so on. But it also hit very small, poor people at the lower levels who try to keep a store of value. And it is, I think, a necessary thing to think about, that mattress and where you might want to put that coin rather than relying upon the banks and the central bank to look after it through your mobile phone. On the other hand, we have found it's pretty inefficient to keep things under the mattress, apart from being bumpy. If anybody finds out, you could find yourself in problems with somebody who might be looking there. So you have the option of either being swindled by a bunch of suits using their digital wallets on you, or finding somebody breaking in your door to go underneath your mattress. There is no escape from the situation of money. So, comrades, the real point here is, as this quote says here, that what we want is a simple global currency and a financial infrastructure that empowers billions of people. The proposal and the philosophy and the mission statement of Mark Zuckerberg is what we socialists want. But I'm not sure that the privatised Libra currency or the super libertarian Bitcoin currency is going to deliver it.